Welcome our audience to yet another beautiful episode. This time we are going to talk with a special guest, Chuck Knabusch. Chuck Knabusch is a tremendous leader. He has gone around the world. He has served in many areas. And so today we are going to share his experiences on how to bulletproof your business in today's uncertain times. This is very, very important because, as you know, the world, in some ways, you'd say, is falling apart. But the good news is Chuck has everything together. He's got a lot of experience that he's going to share with us. And so we'd like to welcome you, our listeners. I'd like to welcome our co-host, Coach Shilpa, and Chuck Knabusch. You're very welcome to this show. And as usual, we'd like to appreciate you for downloading this show, for being part of this community. And so, Coach Shilpa, take it away and welcome our guests and then introduce Chuck.
Yes. Absolutely, with pleasure. So, first of all, welcome our audience and listeners to Lead Talk podcast. And we wish to express our gratitude as always. Because of you, we are reaching countries and places.
Yes.
And that's very important because that's the only way we can spread our influence so that we can be catalyst in your success. And we keep inviting people who can guide you furthermore and take your journey ahead. So I'm very pleased to welcome our special guest, Chuck Knabusch, and also my founder, Dr. Gerald Amandu. So join us in welcoming Chuck, an ex-military operations maverick and best-selling author, to the Lead Talk podcast show. Now, who is Chuck? And you would want to know more about him. Serving 7 years in military, Chuck learned the importance of running and very efficient operations. In this elaborate career, Chuck worked for a multi-billion-dollar manufacturing company for 28 years, and he managed over $80 million budget dollars. In his management role, Chuck oversaw the logistics division, where he maintained 100% production despite his firm experiencing a devastating tornado, and was able to save them $35 million a year in operating cost. Isn't it commendable?
Absolutely.
Chuck has spent, absolutely. And Chuck has spent decades helping business owners gain solutions for actually conducting useless meetings, missed customer deadlines, suffering with small, critical, irritating problems like stretched budgets, lack of time for their own self and personal life. And we are proud to say Chuck has able to resolve these issues for business owners very, very successfully every single time. An important highlight of Chuck's career is in his solution-focused leadership style that has helped companies to reduce cost and utilize the resources to meet the time-critical deadlines. He's an international best-selling author of the book, Hope is Not a Business Strategy. And that is what is today's quote from Chuck. Hope is not a business strategy. A guide to prevent most problems by implementing the right planning. And Chuck is also the owner and CEO of 1310 Business Solutions, LLC. So over to you, Dr. Gerald, to add a few more points in Chuck's specialization.
Absolutely. You see, we did promise that Chuck's achievement will blow you away. So you may say, what is Chuck known for? Now, one of the things Chuck is known in the business world is he helps and guides businesses to implement clear communication and vision that drastically cuts operational costs. We know in today's budget-constrained environment, such activity is something that will help your bottom line. Again, Chuck is known for developing cost-effective processes that ensures that you meet as a business owner your deadlines. And one of the things Chuck likes to do is to do training programs that save time and money while increasing employee loyalty. Now, you've heard about the Great Resignation. So in some way, you'd say Chuck is an antidote to the Great Resignation. And so by all him working, he is able to help you as a business owner to free up your time so that you can focus on points that can be most efficiently leveraged by your activity, right? And one of the key things that, and I think this is very, very nice, is that Chuck is known for helping business owners set and manage clients' expectations so that your customers actually become your sales force. And so in today's episode, we are going to get insights from Chuck's years of illustrious military experience, his management experience, his leadership experience, and all the business advisory services over the years he's been able to provide. So, Coach
Yes.
Shilpa, get Chuck to the stage. I'm sure our listeners are really waiting for him. Go on, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And we start with Chuck asking some important questions first about his life journey, right? And if you stick till end, Chuck is going to give you a beautiful gifts of his wisdom and waiting for the surprises. You will get surprises on the way as well. So, Chuck, most welcome to the Lead Talk podcast once again. Please tell us a little more about your life journey. What exactly triggered you to serve in the military?
Well, first of all, thank you for that warm welcome. I mean, oh my goodness, made me proud to go ahead and hear about me. Well, after graduating high school, I went to the university and failed. I mean, I graduated as a salutatorian, so you'd think, oh, he'd have an easy way, but I didn't have the discipline. I went to a large university, kind of got lost in the crowd, and said, well, ultimately, I'm going to go get a degree. Now's not the time. I thought, where's a great place to go? And I knew that I needed some discipline. So I ended up in the United States Army. And it was an absolutely wonderful, phenomenal experience. And I went in with a very open mind, looking to get discipline.
Wow.
And I was able to go ahead and get it. So now I can kind of apply that type of discipline to the way I work going forward. And then later on, when I decided to go back to the university, it was an absolute breeze because I could go ahead and set aside time to study. I could set aside time to go ahead and read the books, all the things I didn't do as an 18-year-old jumping into university and kind of jumping in over my head.
Okay. As that, thank you for being so vulnerable and telling us very transparently what was the reason to join military. And I'm sure that gave you the right antidote for discipline and what exactly you were looking for. So what made you transition from military to the corporate world then?
I mean, the military was, like I said, a wonderful experience, but it was just not something I was going to go ahead and do for 20 or 30 years. Certainly respect those individuals who do that. But it does go ahead and take an absolute toll on you physically. Also, we were deploying a lot. I had a wife and kids at home, and I was gone probably 9 months out of the year, every year for my last 4 years in the military. So it was not real conducive to the family lifestyle that I wanted. So I said, well, unfortunately, it's time to go ahead, close one chapter and open the next.
Oh, okay. So considering your life preferences, you decided, like, I understand you served military for 4 years, and then you took a conscious choice to serve the corporate world so that you can take care of your family and be with your kids as well. So what are the important family or personal milestones you would like us to know? Like, take us through the journey briefly.
Oh, wow. What a journey. I mean, just going through and spending time, being able to see your kids grow up. And we've got 5 of them. Being able to see some of them have their own kids and have grandkids. And in fact, we have 2 great grandkids. So, it's that whole kind of circle of life. I mean, we hear about it in movies and stuff like that, but it really is a wonderful thing. And being able to go ahead and spend time, and in some cases, there were years I didn't get to spend time with my kids. I get to go ahead and spend it with my grandkids or with my great grandkids and really, really go ahead and make that connection and enjoy life with them.
Wow.
That's fantastic. What was the most beautiful part of the military life and the corporate life as well?
I mean, in military life, well, there's a lot of things you don't know. There are certain things that you do know. I mean, they are very structured. I mean, you knew about what time you were going to get up in the morning. You knew, kind of the basic building blocks of the day, which was kind of very nice. Whereas in corporate life, there's some differences. Yes, you kind of knew what time you were going to get to work. You knew, but you weren't quite sure what time it was going to necessarily
Come back.
end. You also didn't know what curves were going to be thrown.
Yeah.
At you.
And yes, you can kind of have your building blocks of your meetings if you have meetings, but you didn't know what else was going on. So I mean, there's a lot of similarities between the two, but there's a lot of differences also.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah, absolutely. Yes, Dr. Gerard, take it away.
Yes, that's very interesting, and to the audience, I'm sure they're like, okay, they on one side they see a successful military man, really, having made transition and gone over to business life. So let's talk a little bit about the business life. So what were the key steps that you took to become what you are now, an innovative, tenacious, and results-driven manager?
I was kind of the oddity in some ways because I wanted to do anything in operations. My first job was a computer programmer, and everybody would say, well, computer programming isn't really operations, but I focused on the manufacturing part of the business. That's what I wanted to program for. That's what I wanted to understand, how their systems worked, because from that you could kind of help understand their processes. And as I moved through the company, I went from programmer to materials analyst to quality analyst to project manager to logistics before I really got down on the production floor. But it gave me such a great understanding of everything in operations because I kind of saw all the different functional areas. And that's really different in the operations segment. But yet, if you talk to an accountant, I mean, any accountant who's been in accounting for a number of years, they've probably worked payroll and accounts receivable and accounts payable and general accounting and cost accounting. And nobody thinks about all those different functions within accounting because they're all under the accounting umbrella. But in operations, there's a lot of different things that a lot of people don't consider as part of operations, but yet they're all operational. I mean, how do you go ahead, if you're going to make something, you've got to ship it. So logistics is an integral part of operations.
True. Beautiful. I like that.
So, yeah.
I like that. I like the fact that you were able, so your journey is kind of started from down, really. So we can see you, and you span the whole floor, right? So from all, and really coming to know the different segments of operations probably is what made you unique. And so now, one of the things you mentioned from your career is that you were able to learn how to do lean manufacturing. And because today, everybody's talking about resources. So tell us how you're able to help this particular company actually go deep in the area of lean manufacturing and so that other people can actually learn from kind of your expertise, if we say, right?
We had maybe 8 different manufacturing facilities at the time.
Okay.
And one of our plant managers had just got promoted to become the vice president over all of manufacturing. Okay. And he'd kind of been playing with cellular at his plant, and it's shown great promise. I mean, he'd been able to take out a lot of costs. So his cost per unit was way, way down as compared to the others. And his boss, the senior vice president of operations, went to him and said, how do we go ahead and do this across the board? And so he had asked me to be the project manager, and I worked with a phenomenal team of, we brought in, I think, 1 or 2 outside consultants, but we had a lot of great industrial engineers who kind of had some lean experience in their previous operations. And we brought them all together, and probably over 6 months, we came up with a cellular design for building furniture. I mean, and we laid out exactly what the dimensions of the cell were, where every person was going to go ahead and stand, what they were going to go ahead and do. I mean, we created a whole production methodology, and it was a book probably 2 inches thick, believe it or not.
Wow.
because we wanted to define everything, and we wanted every plant to be exactly the same.
The same.
The senior vice president said, hey, I'd read an article about Intel. When Intel creates a new chip plant, they do everything from the paint color to, I mean, everything. The layout is exactly the same. Once you get in the plant, you wouldn't know you're in one plant versus the other. All the signage is the same. But because, you know, they have to be so precise in making their chips that even a speck of dust could go ahead and ruin or change everything that they do. So they make everything exactly the same. Well, we weren't starting from the ground up, so our plants weren't going to go ahead and be exactly the same from the outside, but we could go ahead and at least make our production methodology the same on the inside. So every cell was going to look exactly the same, based on the styles that we're going to go through there. And we created a book basically on how to do it. And then we started rolling it out plant by plant. And it was amazing the amount of savings we were able to find. We weren't getting rid of people. I mean, that was not what lean was all about. It was not in cellular. It wasn't to see how many people we could get rid of. It was how could we focus them doing direct labor versus indirect labor. And we were able to move so much indirect labor into the direct labor, and get so much more productivity out. I mean, and we were doing that right before the big financial collapse in 2008. So, I mean, it was lucky, fortuitous, however you want to put it, that we had kind of just finished that when that was happening, because saving that money helped save the company.
Absolutely. That's really incredible. And just by the way, Coach Shilpa has an accounting background. So this is like music to our ears, right? And I love business. So cost saving and all that. Just one of the things I learned from this is you and your team were able to put everybody in the right spot so that they really focus on doing something that had a direct bearing on the cost. And so at the end of the day, how would you advise somebody who is not organizing his business the way you did? What are some of the key tips that you'd like the listener to take away based on your experience?
Well, I think we had senior management, executive management support. I mean, and when it came time to go ahead and roll this out and get all the plants on board, the senior vice president of operations and the vice president of manufacturing, they went personally to every plant. And they went ahead and introduced this to not just the leadership team, but they went ahead and introduced this to all the way out onto the plant floor. We had large meetings. Yes, you know, meetings aren't always the most productive, but they thought it was so important to say, hey, we believe in this, that we want everybody to have a seat on the bus. Now, you may have a different seat, but I mean, realistically, we want you to have a seat on the bus. Now, that doesn't mean that you want to go ahead and stay. And we did. We lost a few people that they didn't want to go ahead and work in a lean environment, didn't want to work in a cellular environment, didn't want to work in teams. But it's not because the company said, we need to get rid of you. It was because they said, I'm no longer a fit for what the company wants to go ahead and do. I mean, and we took that approach. I mean, and we communicated it and we said, hey, this is absolutely necessary. At the time in the furniture industry, there was a lot of companies outsourcing their work to China. We wanted to stay made in America. So, I mean, there was a lot of themes in there that really resonated with the workers on the floor. And we had already worked with a number of the workers on the floor. Hey, is this reasonable? Is this possible? We didn't go ahead and kind of create a think tank and say, hey, this is what they're going to do and just throw it on them. We had worked in the vice president of manufacturing previous plant. He had done a lot of this. I mean, he hadn't mapped it out. He hadn't documented it, which we needed to do. But he had experimented with it in real time with real people. So we knew it was going to be a success before we rolled it out to all the other plants. So it was very easy to say, look at their success. You know, if they're doing it, why can't we? Yes, they changed the same way from what we were before, a very linear manufacturing facility to a cellular manufacturing facility. And it worked phenomenally.
Wow. I just love that. And talking about change, because this is what most people hate. And you've just given the example. Some people quit, not because the company wanted them to quit, but they did not see themselves as part of the business anymore.
Yes.
So in your case, reflecting back on what the senior vice president did, and also you as one of the key facilitators of that process, what would be some of the things you'd probably do differently in hindsight to have saved those kind of people who didn't want change?
Again, I think, we couldn't have gone ahead and taken them over to the facility where it was working, but we probably could have taken better videos and shown them. So even on an exit interview, hey, before you go, let's show you what this environment really is. Let's let's pick up the phone. Let's call up a couple of people from that facility. Let them know that, yes, they went through a change. That change had its ups and downs like all changes do, but they were able to go ahead and make it to the other side. Because again, I mean, you hate to lose trained, qualified, experienced individuals. But sometimes it's going to happen. I mean, it's not because they're not good people. It just, they understand that they're not a good fit. I mean, I couldn't be an accountant. I went through accounting. I did the classes, but it just did not excite me whatsoever. Now, that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be accountants, and I do, and I highly respect them, but I know that that's not a good fit for me. So, I mean, we all have to go ahead and find our own place in the world, and sometimes knowing what places we don't fit in is as important as finding which place we do fit.
So true. So absolutely true, because it's not just the right people, but the right people in the right place, so that it becomes relevant for them as well as for the organization, right? So that's really fantastic, Chuck. So as a leader, mindset is always important, right? So what are the mindset shifts that help you to ensure the sustainable success, both as a manager and also as a leader?
I think that's a great question, because we had attempted, changes in the past. Well, we would do a little bit of this and might be kind of cellular. We would do a little bit of that. But with the senior vice president, the vice president of manufacturing saying, we are doing this. We are doing this across the board. We are not going to go ahead and backslide. I mean, this is kind of a do or die type of thing. And I think that kind of mindset where, winning is the only option. I mean, we may have to go ahead, tweak this or tweak the conditions, tweak the standards a little bit, but winning is the only condition that we're going to go ahead and accept. And we're going to find the way to win. Again, we're going to go ahead and do it legally. We're going to do it ethically. We're going to do it morally, but we are going to win. And that type of attitude becomes, infectious. Everybody wants to go ahead and be on a winning team. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, I want to be a loser. No, they want to get up and they want to be a winner. So if you can set the circumstances and the business conditions and everything else for them to get there, hey, it means it might be a struggle today to get there, but at the end of the day, we are going to move that ball forward. We are going to go ahead and be a winner.
Wow, fantastic. Because setting that winning tone for the team gets them differently enthusiastic about the goals and the vision of the organization they would even want to achieve. So that's fantastic shift in the mindset, being a winner's mindset. And what specific beliefs did you have to overcome that way? Must have held you back initially because you had a transition from military, then corporate, then again in a leadership role and seen so many challenges. Any specific beliefs that you were thinking that they were holding me back and I had to change them?
Yeah, I mean, we all have limiting beliefs at one time or another. I mean, and that's part of the fear of even changing jobs. And sometimes we just kind of have to let those go. Sometimes talking those out with a good friend, a colleague, a mentor, a coach. Those are the types of things, hey, I'm kind of nervous about this. I'm not sure that I can go ahead and do this. Well, what would prevent you from doing this is the question. Why can't you do this? I mean, can you articulate it? Because generally, if you can't articulate it, it probably doesn't really exist. And it becomes one of those, it's a fear, and there's nothing wrong with a little bit of fear. I mean, we need to have a little nervousness, because that means that we're on our game. That means that we're paying attention to what we're doing.
Exactly.
And as long as we're not freezing, I mean, because we don't want fear to freeze us. We don't want to have that much fear, but a little bit of nervousness. I mean, first time I went down to my first plant and got in front of all the people. I mean, I had 200 people at one operation across multiple shifts. And I sat down in front of them and I told them, I said, and this was a plywood cutting facility. I said, I'm never going to be an expert in cutting plywood. You guys are. I need your expertise to go ahead and make this facility better year over year over year. And they were shocked. Previously, they had been told, well, they only were needed for their muscle to lift a sheet of plywood, put it on the router would cut it. They would go ahead and check the router parts, and then they would stack it onto a pallet. And I said, no, I need your brains. They're like, why do you need our brains? I said, I can go out there and you can show me how to go ahead and do it. I'll run a couple of sheets with you. But because that's not my job, I will never get as good at it as you. So I need to go ahead and be able to listen to you. Human nature is about finding shortcuts, finding more efficient ways to do it. Why? Because we want to go ahead and kind of, I hate to use the term, but we almost want to be lazy. But to get to that lazy point, we're going to have to go through some work. And I mean, and these people were absolutely phenomenal in the shortcuts that they'd learned. And as long as they weren't breaking safety protocols, as long as they weren't breaking quality protocols, hey, we wanted to go ahead and support them and get them faster and faster. And it was because of their insight. And they said, hey, look, I can't do this job for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, because it's so physically demanding. We ended up designing routers that picked up the sheet of plywood for them because that was the heaviest thing. And it made their job easier, quicker, faster, more efficient because we listened to them. And there's no way that we would have come up with that without their insights.
Wow, that's such a fantastic example you have set for the leadership, Chuck. I must say that listening to the people whom we want to lead first, because unless and until we understand them and they feel that they occupy an important space in the scheme of the things, I think we can get brilliant solutions from them. And you being vulnerable out there and saying that, hey, this is not what I'm best at, this is what you are good at, and we need you to make this better. So I think that was the wonderful way of approaching things. And absolutely, you said we have to always break through our limiting beliefs. Can you tell me any one or two examples of how you shifted your limiting beliefs to some empowering beliefs? Can you give me one or two examples of that?
Great question. Even going back to my Army days, I mean, it was, we deployed, we were the first unit to go ahead and deploy what is now a cellular network.
Okay.
I mean, before the civilian cell phones, and I love it on Facebook, you see hey, look at my bag phone. It looks like I could call in an airstrike. No, my first cell phone could call in an airstrike. It was even bigger, boxier, and uglier than a bag phone, believe it or not.
Wow.
But we deployed this and it was like, well, is this really going to go ahead and work? I mean, we had commanders that we supported in the field, and they're like, yeah, I don't know if this is going to be a good thing or not. And, we have our ways. We have our FM radio. We have this, we have that. But, it was so funny, just like the way the cellular system and networks have taken over our personal lives, it took over the military life. I mean, for a commander to go ahead and sit in his vehicle, whether that vehicle is a tracked vehicle, a tank, or a truck, and be able to pick up a phone and securely talk to somebody at the other end and say, hey, something is changing and we need to go ahead and be able to address that change immediately, to prevent, ultimately in war, to prevent people from getting killed. I mean, what a breakthrough that was. And everybody was kind of like, yeah, is this really going to go ahead and change communications? Is this really going to be a benefit from us? I mean, think back to before you had a cell phone or I had a cell phone. We're like, yeah, it might be, the pagers had just kind of been out. Yes, we got the pagers. Yeah. We'd done that. Yeah, it was kind of good, but it was kind of a pain in the butt too.
Yes.
But then we got the cell phones and we could talk to our families when we were traveling. We could go ahead and, pick up the phone and call anybody, anywhere, at any time. Although there is good points to that, there are bad points, and I understand that. but I mean, look at how it absolutely has changed our world.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So going from having that rigidity in mind to looking at the possibilities, what this change can bring to us. That's very, very critical. Over to you, Dr. Gerard.
Yeah, this is phenomenal, and one of the things as leaders and as business owners is, and I'm kind of also surprised that I for some reason I thought that the military did not have all those kind of resistance, right, to change, and it's interesting. So really, then that's a human thing, right? Because Chuck just acknowledges that even his bosses felt uneasy on many things. So I think one as a listener, um, as you listen to us, this is a point for you to reflect that we as human beings all have nervousness, and it's only normal. But what is important is we should have what Chuck says is winning is the only solution, right? So if whatever you are doing, whether you're in career change, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a business owner, whoever you are, change is important. The need to win is very important. And so one of the things I want us now to talk about is you. Okay. A little bit about you. We noticed that, Chuck, you are multi-talented, multi-skilled. What would you say are probably the three things that set you apart from the rest of other managers and other business advisors and consultants? Because if I would like to work with you, what are those unique things I would get out of you?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, anybody who worked with me would tell you that I'm tenacious.
Okay.
I am a bulldog. I will go ahead if I bite into an issue, we are going to go ahead and run that issue to ground. Absolutely. And I think that in some ways that has served me very well in my career. There have been times where I probably took that a little too far. I mean, but isn't that the way of anything?
Yeah.
You know, I like to go ahead. You talked earlier in your intro, but I like to set expectations up front, because I've learned that if you don't take control of those expectations as a business owner, as a leader, then they're going to be applied to you. And how do you go ahead and succeed when you don't know what the expectation is, or when you don't control the expectations? A great example, a couple of years ago when COVID started, we wanted to build a pool, my wife and I. So we went to a pool guy, and he's like, well, you know, it's COVID. There's everybody wants to build a pool because everybody's sitting at home with not a lot to do. So I understand. So what are we talking about? He says, once we turn dirt, it'll take about 6 weeks. I said, okay. He says, for every day of rain, you're going to have to add about 3 days to that, because it needs a day or so to dry out and some rescheduling issues. I said, that's fair. And he says, but we're not going to be able to start like today, tomorrow. I said, not a problem. Whenever you start, you know, now I think I've got the expectations. Well, he started, I don't know, a month or two later. He turned dirt. You know, we're thinking, hey, 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, we'll be swimming, depending on the rain. It took 21 months. So he set the expectations, but we didn't manage to the expectations. When things changed, I mean, he didn't want to say it, but obviously he lost some of his subcontracting crews. And, you know, be honest with your customer about that. They understand. There'll be a lot more understanding if you go ahead and say, hey, we lost our crew. You know, everyone's out there looking for the biggest dollar. We lost some people. We're going to have to rehire some people. That's going to set us back 4 months. I mean, be upfront, honest, and go ahead and continually adjust those expectations, because we would have been a much happier customer even after 21 months if we had been kind of told that along the path. But when we're told, you know, 6 weeks, you know, so even if we go ahead and say, oh, it'll be 12 weeks and it'll take another 2 months to go ahead and start, you know, we're thinking then 20 weeks, we're at 21 months. I mean, that was 4 times as much or more than that, which is absolutely crazy. So I think it's really important to set those expectations. So a lot of times, whether I'm the customer or I'm the business leader, I like to sit down and say, what is it we're trying to go ahead and achieve? Are you sure that's what we want to achieve? What are the boundaries we want to go ahead and set with that? Because again, there's a lot of ways to go ahead and achieve whatever the objective is or the outcome is, but we need to understand what those boundaries are also. So setting and managing expectations right from the start is something that I've always tried to go ahead and do. And then, I'm tenacious as anything, and we'll get there. We will go ahead and find a way to get there.
I love that. I love that. And again, this goes with winning is the only option, right? And I like that. It's so beautiful. And so talking a little bit about businesses, I know you help businesses thrive. And that's why we call this podcast Bulletproofing Your Business. So tell us a little bit, how do you actually help businesses to grow revenue and implement continuous improvement?
Well, I think part of it starts with understanding two things: your values and your purpose. And I'm not talking about mission or vision, because I think those are separate from the purpose. I think, recent examples, Bombas, but even going all the way back to Patagonia, they were very clear as to what their purpose was, and it was different from their vision. It was different from their mission. And I think it's, it's kind of it shows part of their values. But, ultimately, it comes down to, how do customers want to interact with us? How do employees want to interact with us? And if you don't have a clear set of values or a clear purpose, then it's kind of hard. You can go ahead, slap a lot of things into a business, into an organization that can make improvements, but are they fundamentally going to stick, if you do something that's, a little bit off from your values? So I like to kind of start there, at least have a conversation, make sure that they're well defined, make sure, do a 360, talk with all the stakeholders, find out, are we living the values? There's a lot of corporations out there that go ahead and they slap them up on the wall. Why? Because it's the thing to do. But if you talk to employees, they say, no, they don't care about people. They care about customers, they care about revenue, but they don't care about people, because I live it every day. So, those are the things that you start getting alignment between your values and your actions. Now, all of a sudden, it becomes so much easier to implement lean, or to implement a Six Sigma, or to implement project management things, because you can go ahead and tailor them to your values. So everything is seen through the lens of those values. So, I know a lot of people say, well, we don't want to talk. We already have our value set. We already have our purpose. Yeah, but I think it's always worth revisiting on the front end, to make sure you've got that alignment all the way through any implementation, any changes, anything else. Because it also may go ahead and say, okay, if we value people, and we're making this huge change, it means that we may want to go ahead and talk about rearranging seats on the bus rather than telling people they're on the wrong bus. So, it sets the tone. It sets some of those boundaries that we talk about, and setting the expectations of what winning looks like.
Yeah. Beautiful. I just love this. I love this as somebody who's been in corporate space for quite some time, and this is like music to my ears. And as you listen, our audience, I hope you're taking notes. You should take notes, and these are, whether you're in corporate, whether in business, these are lessons worth implementing, I can tell you. And one of the things, yes, go ahead, Philippa.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when Chuck, you mentioned that we must first align our values with action rather than straight away jumping to vision and mission. Because if that itself is not aligned, then something is, basically missing in the foundational space, right? So, and I also love when you say, like, whether we need to change the seats in a bus or whether you are in a wrong bus. Those are two different perspectives, and people are treating this as one and the same. So that's wonderful insight, Chuck. Thank you for that. Yeah, Dr. Gerard. Sorry.
Really building on that, I think that is, as you listen to this, I would like you to listen to that part again. Is your team in the right bus? Are they in the right seat? Those are two important phenomena that you, as a leader, as a business owner, you need to be crystal clear about your team. So let's talk about cost reduction, because lean is your expertise. That's something you've helped companies do a lot. So tell us, how do you help companies in this area?
Well, again, sometimes it depends on what the company's looking for. I mean, sometimes you can do a huge transformation where we're changing everything. Sometimes it's just picking out little bits and pieces,
Okay.
Okay. But it all starts with going to where the work is. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things I kind of struggled with in lean is there's all these Japanese terms, and you kind of think, oh, do I need to really know them? Yes and no. I mean, it's great to talk with other lean practitioners, but I'm not necessarily big into, hey, let's go ahead and come up with or use every one of the Japanese terms. But I mean, I think this is one, going to Gemba, going to where the work happens, going out there, but going out there with a purpose. I've known other people who go out and, their sensei drew a circle on the floor, said, stand there and see what's going on. I think we need to go a little bit further than that. Let's go out and see what's going on, but within the construct of what do we want to be going on? What are we expecting? So do we have a gap already? And part of that is, okay, if we have a gap between what our expectations are and what's actually happening, have we documented our expectations? Have we trained our expectations? Now, do we see some waste in between what's going on right now? Because it may be that we had previously designed the most efficient system possible, but people have fallen out of that. Or is it that they're doing this because they think it's quicker? They don't understand the bigger picture sometimes, and therefore, they've deviated. So, I think there's a lot of great concepts in lean, but sometimes we have to kind of tweak them and play with them. Okay. One of the things that we saw in our lean transition is previously somebody who was making, let's say, frames. They wanted a bunch of work. Let's say you're making it from your left to your right. You wanted a bunch of kind of raw materials always on your left to know that you had something to do so you could produce finished frames to your right. Well, but lean is not about having this great big mountain of work to your left anymore. It may be part of it is trusting to make sure that somebody will deliver you the raw materials when you need them or just before when you need them.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's a big change for people, especially if you're working on an incentive or even if you're working hourly and you have a great work ethic. You want to see that mountain because you don't want to go ahead and stop. But now all of a sudden lean is telling you, well, you're only going to have 3 or 4 sets of raw material there. You're going to go ahead and work on it. And by the time you're done with the last one, more raw material will deliver.
Yes.
There's a big trust factor in that. Yes. So again, going back to ultimately people, we can get rid of that waste, that big mountain of stuff. But we found that people were squirreling away parts left and right because they wanted to always make sure that they had something to work on. And it was part of it was building the trust, saying, yes, it will go ahead and deliver to you in time. Doesn't mean it'll be perfect, but it will deliver to you in time. And it's building that trust. It's working with people because, again, ultimately, the best organizations out there, I don't care who they are, making the best products. If you don't have people there, you don't have anything. I mean, you're not going to have products made. You're not going to have services delivered. You're not going to be able to ship that stuff. While automation is great, and I'm a firm believer in it, we haven't gotten to the point where we can automate everything and get rid of people. So, I mean, we need to go ahead and focus first that an organization is all about people. So build the trust, work with them, get their insights, see what they're doing. Why are they doing it a certain way? It may be because that's the way they were taught. One of the things I like to talk about is, if you're having turnover in your organization and things keep getting worse and worse and worse, and you're kind of like, why? Well, did you give them notes to go ahead on how to do their job? Well, no. So how did those notes that they're using come about? Well, I sat down with them and they took notes. Well, right there can be a gap because what notes they took is going to be the new documentation. Now, if you have that person train the next person, maybe they hand over their notes, or maybe they just say, well, here, watch me do it. Take your own notes. Now we've got another degree of allowing just a hot mess and waste to go ahead and get in there. And we do that over and over. So it's so much better the first time. Let's document it. Even if we use that first person's notes, let's clean it up. Let's go back and audit it. Let's see if we can get an outsider to do that process using those notes. And once we have that, let's lock those down. Let's formalize those. So anytime we have a turnover in that position, we pull out those notes and say, this is how you do your job. I mean, they're little bitty easy things. We don't have to talk about lean as a huge thing that manufacturing companies do. It can be done in any office. It can be done in for any service industry. And I think that's where lean hasn't gotten necessarily the traction that it should, simply because that's came from Toyota. It's a manufacturing thing. It's out on the shop floor. It's for dirty. That's all crap. It can be used anywhere because it's all about just documenting processes, saying, hey, how can we improve that process, and then adjusting the documentation for that next group.
I love that. I really truly love that. The fact that you are busting this myth that lean as a methodology is not just for manufacturing, that as a business owner, especially times like this is a process, this is a principle, this is a practice that you should actually take on. And so just before we move to the next segment, I would like you to share maybe 3 or 4 pieces of advice that our businesses can use to bulletproof their efficiency, their business as a whole in today's uncertain times.
Well, again, I think it comes down to working with the people, setting expectations even of a process, and documenting that process, and then saying, okay, how can we do it better? Because the person doing it probably has already taken 3 or 4 shortcuts. Why? Because we as humans look for shortcuts in everything we do. Hey, I can go ahead, copy, paste this. And we do. There are such humans are such wonderful creatures because we find the shortcuts. But then what we need to do is document that new process and say, okay, it takes less time. What else can we go ahead and do? What can we do with that time it is freed up? There's another tool I like, standard work. I mean, job descriptions to me they're boring. They don't really tell you what you do. But standard work that says, hey, every day I need to do these 3 things and it's going to take this long. Every week I need to do these 5 things and it's going to take this long. Every month, every quarter, every year. And then there's going to be some ad hoc things that we don't know whether they're going to happen today. We don't know if they're not going to happen today, but I also need to reserve a certain amount of my time in case they do happen. Because, a lot of times businesses will say, oh, okay, we hire this person. We want to give them 40 hours of work. Do you? Because then if something happens that was unexpected or that we know is going to happen, we just don't know when it's going to happen, nobody has time to go ahead and do it. So what does that do to the customer? That, we'll get to you when we get to you, becomes the attitude. That's not what the customer wants to hear. So we need to go ahead and reserve, whether that's 10%, 15% of our people's time, to deal with the ad hoc, to deal with the chaos of life, because it's going to happen. We know it. I mean, we as leaders know it's going to happen. It happens to us. I don't care how beautifully we've had our executive assistant or we've created our schedule for today, that at 8 o'clock we're going to do this and at 8:15 we're going to do that. Guess what? At 8:05, something happens and there goes my 8:15, my 8:30, my 9 o'clock, my 10 o'clock. It's going to happen. So let's go ahead, start rearranging things so we can go ahead and focus on the immediate. I mean, I'd love to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and be a fire marshal and prevent all fires. But we still know that mistakes are going to happen and a fire is going to start, and we need to go back and take a look at that and learn how to prevent that for the future.
Love that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And even when the fire goes off, not to keep looking at each other and wonder who's now going to take care of fire, but already have that built in the system, Chuck. So I love that standard work process. Actually, it's much more efficient and it's much more futuristic and realistic than just defining the KRIs. Absolutely. So I would like to speak about the leadership because leadership is most important asset for success, even in the personal life, even in business. So how would you say is your leadership style and how your leadership is evolved over the years? from the days to military to managing 80 million division budget to now being an advisor?
I mean, it's kind of interesting. You think of the leadership, it's always top down, it's always very autocratic. But I was in the military at a time where, I mean, even me, but the young soldiers were asking why. Well, if bullets aren't flying, I think that's a great time to go ahead and answer that question. because to go ahead and help people understand the why, it helps them to go ahead and follow that leader, to understand why that leader's telling them, hey, they're not doing this to go ahead and be mean. They're not doing this because it's a random event. They're doing this to go ahead and train for something bigger. And I think we're seeing that not just in the military, but we're seeing that in civilian life. Now, there are times where you can't answer the why. I mean, a great time in my civilian life is when the tornado took out our wood cutting plant. We didn't have time to go ahead and stop and answer every question as to why this, why that, in what we were doing. Because again, there were safety considerations. We couldn't have people inside the building because the roof could collapse. You don't want to go ahead and say, well, why are you locking me out of the building? Well, we'll get to that in a few minutes, but first let me lock that door, make sure everybody's out of the building, and then lock that door, and then we'll put a sign up and everybody will understand the why. But I think, we as people have evolved to the point where we need to know a little bit more than just the what. We want to know and the how. We want to kind of know the why. And I think we as leaders need to go ahead and answer those questions for young people. I mean, and old people too. But I think the young people are challenging us. And then sometimes because we've dealt with the why for so long, oh my God, why do we have to go ahead and answer this question? Why am I getting a million questions from this individual? When really we need to step back, have some patience. They haven't gone on the same journey that we have. Their journey is probably much shorter if they're much younger than us. And we do need to go ahead and they do need to understand the why, and we need to go ahead and communicate that, because it's from the why sometimes they better understand the objective and they can come up with a much more efficient how. How do we go ahead and do this? So, I mean, understand that not every time can we go ahead and do it, but take the time and talk about the why with people. And I think leadership is a lot about that. And we talk about culture, we talk about vision, mission, values, purpose. Really, we're getting into some of the whys as you kind of get into some of that. We're talking about the hows and we're talking about the whats, but we also need to go ahead and make sure they understand the why. Why are we doing this?
Wow, that's absolutely beautiful, because yes, as we grow in the leadership, sometimes we feel why there are unnecessary questions, and not to disregard them, but rather go deep in that. So we may not know how our methodology may change because of those answers to the young questions, or even to anybody working in our team. Once we satisfy their questions, we even can have more clarity. And as you say, like, there is also a time when you answer all this question, not when there is a demanding situation where you need to have a complete autocratic style of leadership, right? It's also when the time when you are setting the tone and the normalcy of the operations is on. That's beautiful, Chuck. So what leadership challenge or any mistakes did you face in your journey, and how did you overcome them? Like, any instances you would like to share with us in your leadership journey?
Well, I think some of my biggest mistakes were work-life balance. I mean, and I know that's something that everybody kind of struggles with. But I don't think work-life balance needs to be 50-50 or it needs to be, 60-40. It needs to be what you sit down and define. And, there were times that because I didn't sit down and define it ahead of time, I got what I got. My family got what they got. And it wasn't always the balance that we all desired. Because, I would spend long hours at work. I'd come home late for dinners and that kind of thing. And, it created stress, it created strife, it created, all sorts of things. So, I mean, I think it's great to articulate it, set expectations, both with yourself, with your employer, if that's the case, or with your business, if, you're leading or you're an entrepreneur or a solopreneur, with your family. Have those conversations and say, hey, look, okay, there's going to be exceptions, but this is what I want to go ahead and achieve. Why? They're going to help you achieve that.
Yeah.
And I think part of, leadership to me is all about the people. It's all about the people side. So, talk with the people that are important. Talk with the people that you interact with. You'd be surprised if you're an entrepreneur, how much your business people want you to take vacations. They want you to go ahead and be able to recharge. Why? Because they're with you, maybe because your charisma, and your charisma will go up and down based on your mental state. So they want you to go ahead and go out and recharge. They want to go ahead and see you succeed, and they know you're not going to go ahead and do it if you're working 20 hours a day for 26 weeks straight. They know that you're going to start making mistakes. Those mistakes are going to go ahead and roll down to them. So I think work-life balance is a great place to kind of start with leadership and figure it out. I mean, for yourself, but also work with your people to go ahead and understand what theirs work-life balance is. A big portion of leadership, as I said, it's all about people. It's about mentoring those on your team, those who work with you. What are they looking for? How do you go ahead and help them achieve that? I mean, I love seeing some of the people, some of the cell coaches and supervisors underneath me become production managers over time. They wanted to go ahead and learn things. Okay, this is where we need to go ahead and focus you. I mean, yeah, you've got a full day of work, but here's some other things that you can learn as you go ahead and do that. These are things you can watch out for, take notes on, so you can go ahead and become, they're already a leader, but become a leader on that next level. And I think it's all about that. I mean, some of my best conversations were kind of after work hours. We had multiple shifts, and having one of those young leaders come in and sit down and say, Chuck, how do I get to your job? Because I wanted them to take my job, because that frees me up to take the next job. Absolutely. And I think, we don't always think about, we want to be so lean that we don't have that second string, that third string. But look at whether it's a football team, a baseball team, whatever, they always have a plan as to what they're going to do next. What happens if this quarterback, gets hurt? Second string quarterback, he's been working as hard as the first string quarterback in practices. He's been running the drills, and he's got to go ahead. He's got one more challenge. He's got to come from being absolutely cold. He didn't have a chance to warm up, and he's now in the game. He's in the game just like that. So we need to prepare those leaders underneath us to do the same thing. We don't know when something's going to happen to us. We want that business to run, very smoothly when we go on vacation. Why? We don't want to have to take 412 calls. We don't want to have to micromanage from halfway around the world. That's not the way business works. That's not a business then.
Absolutely. That's so fantastic. And it's a great insight, because some people just for the sake of maintaining their autocracy in the business, they don't share enough, and they don't prepare, backup plan in advance and the succession planning in advance. And that is maybe satisfying to the egos of the leaders at that point in time, but it's not helping the business and the organization. So that's absolutely fantastic. So what advice would you give to new business owners about leadership? Because they want to be feeling strong all the time, and they want to be on the top of their game.
Well, I mean, leadership, like anything, is going to go ahead and have its ups and downs. I mean, there's going to be times where you're feeling down and you need to go ahead and step away and recharge. Do it. I mean, realistically, you're going to be better off. Your people are going to be better off. Your business is going to be better off. Your customers are going to be better off. Do it. Whether, it may just be for an hour. It may be, hey, you just need to take a quick walk around the block. Just let off some steam, let it go. And I think, leaders need to go ahead and, because they're projecting outward so much, they also need to be able to look inward, look at themselves. I mean, we as leaders think, oh, it's all about sacrifice. It's all about, I've got to, if my people are working 18 hours, I got to work 20. There may be some truth to that, but, is 20 hours reasonable? It means if you're having to put in 20 hours because your people are working 18, that you don't have the right processes in place. I mean, that should be an indicator to you to say, we've got a problem. We need to go ahead and fix it. And being a leader, to be the first person to see that. It's not a race. You don't have to be the first person. but it'd be so much nicer that you can recognize the problem before all your people have to live with it for any length of time. So, I mean, pay attention to what's going on around you. I mean, it's kind of the whole forest and the trees. I used to walk the plant floor with cell coaches and supervisors, and they'd be like, well, I don't see anything. Well, I said, walk out, walk around the plant, come back in, and pretend you've never seen any of this before. Ask questions. Why is this happening like this? Why is that? Look with a new set of eyes and really try it. Can you do it? Absolutely. But you have to train yourself to go ahead and do it. And you'd be surprised what you can go ahead and see. You'd be surprised what you've been putting up with for a great length of time. And, that's the waste that we need to go ahead and get rid of. And it can come in all shapes and forms, and then once you get rid of that waste, document it. Okay, here's our new standard, and post it. Make sure everybody can see it. So now you're now training everybody to look through those same set of eyes that you look through. I mean, visual factory management, I love it. I mean, it's not just about, hey, how fast are we making stuff, but what does the place look like? Do we have a mess here? Are we putting good product or, that's not quite finished on the floor? Probably not the place it needs to go ahead and go. I love going to the airport, one, because I love to travel, but I also love the 5S that airports use all around the gate. Yeah. Every one of those baggage carts has a place, and it's painted out on the floor. Every one of those tuggers has a place. Now, some airports enforce it a lot more than others. Yeah. But isn't it absolutely gorgeous when you see one that's using it well?
Yeah, there is some order in place. Yeah, absolutely.
That's absolutely
that's so fantastic. And thank you, Chuck, for that advice, because every time we interview people like you, myself, and Dr. Gerard, we are also learning in the process. And when you say that inward journey, accept when you need time out, stay curious, don't take things for granted just because you've been doing it over the years of times. You always can find something which you can change, and that putting the things in order and having place for the things, it's very, very critical. And I love that airport example. Like, somewhere so many things going on and still you see some, order in that chaos. So that's really beautiful. So take it away, Dr. Jaya.
I just love, Chuck just left me laughing, and I'm sure as you listen to this episode, you can relate, right? And as we mentioned, Chuck has seen it all. He's been in the military, he's been in the corporate world, and now he's helping businesses. And so let's talk a little bit about role models and mentors, because as it is, nobody became who he or she is just on their own. Everybody needs some mentors at some point. So who would you say, Chuck, are the most influential mentors in your success journey?
Well, I think, first and foremost, it had to be my father and my grandfather. Okay. I mean, my grandfather started the business that I ended up working in much later. My father ran it for a number of years. And I mean, just to see how innovative my grandfather was, and how disciplined my father was in able to go ahead and run a multi-billion-dollar organization. But I mean, some of the people who mentored me, I mean, there was the production manager before me when I stepped into upholstery production. I mean, the insights that he had, I mean, he could walk up and down. This was before we went cellular. He could walk up and down the line and know exactly what was going on. He was able to go ahead and see that, but he was able to transfer that knowledge to me. He was able to get me to open my eyes to see things that, the first time I walk up and down, okay, it looks like busy chaos. I don't know what I'm looking at. And he was able to go ahead and explain that to me. That senior vice president of operations and the vice president of manufacturing I mentioned earlier that helped lead us into cellular. I mean, just the mentoring that they did at times to see how they interacted and how they led. They followed their moral compass. They went ahead and, they went ahead and did what was right even when nobody was looking. They looked for performance measures. Yes, they were hard at times, but we knew what the expectations were, And chances are when they were hard, it was because we were trying to find a way around those expectations, or trying to find the easy path, and there wasn't. I mean, it's absolutely amazing the number of people that have touched my life as I've gone through it. And I mean, just like the acknowledgments in my book. I mean, I could have gone on I could have written a whole book of just acknowledge of all the people who are absolutely phenomenal. But I think, there's something to learn anywhere. All we have to do is open our ears to listen, and we can pick up something from absolutely anyone, anywhere.
Absolutely. I love, and one of the things that just is coming very clear to me is the fact that you are saying in some ways that anybody really can mentor you. And I think that humility speaks volumes, and that's really very striking to me. And one of the things I personally like about mentorship is the fact that it can change your life. So what advice would you give to our listeners in terms of mentorship? How can they get the best out of mentorship?
Listen, ask questions. I know, the first time you work with a mentor, you don't even know what questions to ask. Absolutely. And I think that's where a good mentor will go ahead and start out by probably talking your ear off initially. But over time, as you start to pick up a little bit of this or that, ask why, ask how, start to go ahead and understand, ask the questions. And, to me, a good mentee, person being mentored, will go ahead and you can tell if they're good at doing what they're doing, because their questions will ramp from zero till you'd be surprised. They'll drive you nuts in some ways. But I think that's a good thing. I mean, you need to go ahead and understand what's going on. And the only way you can do it is through questions and answers. It's the way to go ahead and learn. I mean, and a great mentor will go ahead and kind of use the Socratic method to some degree. We'll go ahead and pose questions to you, let you think it through. You might even come up with a couple of alternatives, say, I'm not quite sure, it could be A or B or C. Well, and then the mentor will go ahead and take it back. Well, how do we go ahead and view those alternatives through our values, through our purpose, through our mission, through our vision? Do they go ahead and move us forward to that? And you'd be surprised how that goes ahead and eliminates A and C. And now all of a sudden B becomes extremely clear. So, I think those conversations are absolutely phenomenal. And you can have those with a formal mentorship, or you can have those with an informal thing. I mean, you'd be surprised. Just talk to people.
I agree with you. What should take it away?
Yes, absolutely. That's such a great insight. It's not only just enough to have a mentor, but what exactly to talk with mentor so that you get the best guidance and best out of your mentor as well. I want to talk to you, Chuck, about for a minute or so about your book, that hope is not a strategy. What specifically ignited or inspired you to write this book? And what would be the top 3 insights the business owners can take from this book?
Hope is not a business strategy came out. I had just stopped working with a client of mine. I reached out and got a business coach. And I said, okay, I'm kind of between clients. What should we go ahead and do? Okay. So we started talking, and over the course of about 3 months had all sorts of conversations. And he said, I think you've got a book in you. He's probably more than one, but you've got a book in you. He said, why don't you go ahead and write a book? I said, well, are you sure? Who's going to go ahead and listen to it? He said, well, let's kind of start just like a business. Who would your audience? What are you trying to go ahead and tell them? How are you trying to go ahead and help them? And I said, great approach. I mean, sometimes we as coaches don't go ahead and apply our coaching skills back to ourselves. So it was great to have a business coach ask me the same questions I ask a lot of my clients. And we kind of went through, and one of the sayings I used to say all the time was, hope is not a business strategy. Hope is not, and people heard it all the time. And they're like, well, but it's tough to go ahead and project what we're going to do next week or next month or next quarter or next year. I said, yeah, I know it's tough, but we still need to go ahead and do it. So that's kind of how we got the title. And then it just started flowing. I mean, I spent another 3-4 months writing the book. Now, because I knew nothing about writing a book, it had 50 chapters. And I took it to my developmental editor, and she's like, Chuck, this is not what a business book looks like. And I got to thinking, yeah, you're probably right, but I don't know what I don't know. And she says, well, pick the best business book that you know. And I said, okay, Good to Great is one that I really, really like. And she said, how many chapters are in that? And she says, realistically, every business book should be between 12 and 14 chapters. So she says, I'll help you rearrange your content to go ahead and put it in that 12 to 14 chapter type of format. But I said, and then I struggled because I wanted something that is not necessarily a book you have to read from cover to cover. I wanted something that could be a reference to people. So she's like, well, but that's not kind of standard. I said, well, okay, I'm not always a standard individual. So let's put that into some of the appendixes, or we'll go ahead and put that into an index in the back. And let's talk about, because the way I approached everything is, let's talk about problems and solutions. Problems that my wife and I had encountered in working with small, mid-sized businesses. A lot of them are from contractors, only go to be very, very relatable. Because if we talk about furniture manufacturing, a lot of people will say, well, I don't know furniture manufacturing. I'm not going to become a furniture manufacturer. Don't necessarily want you to be. I want you to be the best you can be. So let's talk about something that we've probably done. Maybe we've built a pool. Maybe you've built a house. Maybe you've dealt with a plumber. Maybe you've just dealt with an HVAC person to come in and fix your air conditioner or your heater when it needed it. So we talk about problems in there, and then we talk about, okay, this is what went wrong. How could we do it better? We talk about some cases where a contractor did something phenomenally. I had one contractor. He came up to the door, knocks, I'm here for my appointment. Absolutely, come on in. And the first thing he did is he put little booties on over his boots. My wife noticed it immediately. Wow, you're not dragging outside dirt into my house. I mean, my wife does a lot to keep our house clean, and she's very proud of that, as she should be. But she was so thrilled that this contractor put on little booties. Now, was there a cost to that? Absolutely. Low. I'm sure it was buried in the cost of his doing business, but it was something that delighted my wife. And guess what? She's going to talk to 10 of her friends and say, this contractor is going to walk in without, he's not going to have to take off his shoes. He's going to put a bootie on, and therefore he's not going to track dirt throughout her house. So she has to go back and do more work after she just finished doing work. So, I mean, it's these types of things that I wanted to go ahead and capture in my book. So, and again, it comes back to a lot of what we talked about. I mean, understand your values, understand your purpose. I think those are fundamental before you start building your vision and your mission. Set expectations. I don't care whether it's with your suppliers. I don't care whether it's with your customers, with your employees. I think they all need to be done ultimately. But set expectations up front and manage them. We're not writing things in stone here. Okay, we kind of got off track here. We're going to make an adjustment. We're going to go ahead and learn from this. We're going to go ahead and readjust our expectations because business conditions have changed. COVID's a great example of that. And I think those are the things. And then, it's all about the people. I mean, we need to go ahead and be focused on the people, not just the customer, not just our investors, but, the employees as well. Because how many times have we walked into a place that says, you want to fill out a complaint, it's this 1x1 little square. That sends a message. That sends a message to the customer. Is that really the message we want to? I mean, we've all laughed at it, but is that the message we want to send? So, my book is all about very, very practical aspects where you can go ahead and find, hey, I'm struggling with expectations. I'm struggling with time. I've got way too many meetings. Well, how do we go ahead and filter those down? If it's a meeting where you are critical to make a decision, you have to be there. If you're not making a decision, what's the objective of the meeting? If the meeting doesn't have an objective, not an agenda, an objective, what are we trying to get done? If it's just going to go ahead and set up another meeting, is that really one that you want to attend? So, I mean, I think my book is filled with a lot of very pragmatic, very practical tips whether you're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a department head, a CEO, a chief operating officer, as to how to go ahead and improve operations within your facility and within your scope of control.
Wow, I love that approach, Chuck, when you said that other books have these chapters, but I'm writing this book because there is a reference point when you get stuck. And I'm listing all them out because I've seen all those problems. And to somebody, that problem can be a showstopper. So that's fantastic concept. I loved it absolutely. And it would be like a guidance to people who want to write a book. I want to take a pause here and ask you this question, which is our favorite question, mine's and Gerald's, is that we call this a lead talk because there comes a moment in everybody's life when we decide to lead our life, not by default, but by design. So can you tell us about that, your personal private moment where you decided whatever is there, but now onwards, I'm going to lead my life?
I think it happened when I was very, very young. I was in Boy Scouts. I had just graduated from Webelos and Cub Scouts into Boy Scouts. And I had gone to an Eagle Scout Court of Honor where they award the highest award in Boy Scouts. And I said, that's what I want. So I went into my Boy Scout handbook and I looked, what's the minimum amount of time that I need to go ahead and pass through every rank? And I think ended up being about 2 years at the time. And I said, okay, in 2 years, I want to be an Eagle Scout. So now how do I backwards plan that? Kind of my, I guess, budding project manager in me, even back when I was, 11 years old, said, how do I plan that? So when I go to summer camp, I go ahead and get the right merit badges. When between summer camps in the fall, the winter, I can go ahead and get the right merit badges to set myself up for 2 years by my 13th birthday that I would go ahead and be an Eagle Scout. And it happened. And I think I learned from that, you know what? We control our own destiny. We can go ahead and achieve what we want to achieve. We can go ahead and do what we need to do if we set our mind to it and we go ahead and create a plan.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that special moment with us. Yes, over to you, Dr. Gerald, while we are close to summing up our conversation.
Yes, this is very interesting. And I like to just jump on what you said. We actually control our destiny if we plan for it. And that's important. And at this point in your life, you've done so much. You're a grandparent. You've been successful in corporate and military, and now being a grandparent, it's something phenomenal. And one of the things at this point for most people is looking for the next stage of significance. So what is your next level contribution and in terms of significance for you as well?
Well, I think part of it was in writing the book, I want to give back. Okay. I want to find those organizations that have a need. I mean, I might get a little income from it, but that's not what's really driving me. I want to go ahead and take the lessons that I've learned in my life. And if it can go ahead and save you one hard lesson, I'm a success. And I know we don't always learn lessons, from others who are telling them to us. Sometimes we have to kind of live through them ourselves and stumble and stuff like that. But if I can go ahead and save you one stumble and I can make your life better in some way, and just through one of the lessons that I've learned, I think I'm a phenomenal success. And that's really what I want to kind of do in my semi-retirement is, give back, find ways to give back. And the book was kind of a start. Hopefully we can do some other consulting engagements and coaching engagements with people to go ahead and do that even more. But it's not about, hey, what can I charge? It's about what can we go ahead and give back to make you and your organization far more successful, either as an individual or as an organization that supports a lot of other individuals.
Beautiful. I love that. So really giving back is a theme that's clearly written. As I look at you, as I listen to you, and I love that. Now, one of the things we usually like to ask our guests is, what question would you wish that we had asked you, but until this point we haven't asked?
the two of you have been phenomenal in the way you've been able to do deep dives. And I really can't go ahead and think of a question that you haven't gone ahead and examined. I mean, you've examined kind of the personal side. You've examined kind of the business side. You've talked about my successes, but you've also asked where I made mistakes. And I think that's a great thing, because it's from our mistakes is what we learn. I mean, and that's kind of when I opened up. I said, I started out after graduating high school, major success. I failed. But I learned, because a lot of it's about the resilience of we as humans. How do we get back up? How do we go ahead and resolve it? I mean, most people would say my life's been a success. It has, but it's been a success because of all the failures I've had along the way. And I think that's always something neat to bring out, whether I'm the guest or somebody else is the guest, because that's where our learning moments happen.
I love
Wow,
that.
beautiful, beautiful. Actually, we also learned a lot from you, Chuck. And we now go to the rapid fire questions. We love to do that because we enjoy doing that with our guests. And we're going to ask you back-to-back questions, which you can answer in one line or one word. Are you ready?
Yeah, I think so.
Good.
Okay.
Let's go.
So what is your most embarrassing moment, Chuck?
Most embarrassing moment. There's just so many of them. Probably back in 7th grade, I was up on a stage running for treasurer, and we did something to kind of have some fun, but it was embarrassing just because I was young. And I mean, I had this big scroll, and I rolled it out, and it rolled off the stage and way into the audience to go ahead and give my speech as to why I should be the treasurer.
Okay, that's amazing. Okay, one thing you love most about your life now at this stage?
It's not all about the work, the grind. It's not all about the 9 to 5, the 7 to 4, whatever you want to go ahead and call it. But I can take the time and really spend it with kids and grandkids and great grandkids.
Wonderful, that's amazing. So, Chuck, you love to speak about values. So, what are your top 3 values, Chuck?
People, integrity, and resilience.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. What is that one thing you simply cannot tolerate?
Time. Not being on time drives me nuts. Again, partly from my military, partly from my work.
We can totally resonate with that. And what is that one thing you wish you knew in your 20s?
I wish I had known a lot more about how to deal with people much younger. I'm an introvert by nature. And I needed to know more about how to work with people to be a better leader much earlier in life.
Wow, fantastic. Yes, Gerard.
So, Chuck, what do you love most about leading people?
The people. I mean, because a lot about leadership is development, and it's working with people.
Yes. And knowing that, so what's your favorite leadership style?
The style that's necessary to get the job done. Because I don't think that any one of us have a single style. I think we go ahead and fluctuate up and down the spectrum based on what the circumstances need. If all of a sudden the building's on fire, I'm going to become very, very autocratic. Is that my first thing I want to do? No, but that's what that situation calls for.
Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. What do you absolutely hate about leading others?
Because I am an introvert, it's exhausting. I mean, I need to go back home. I need to go ahead and read a book. I need to get away from people for a little bit to recharge my batteries. Again, but that's because I'm an introvert. It is what it is. I know that about myself, and I deal with it.
Absolutely.
Wow, fantastic.
I love that. So what's your top leadership aspiration today?
Just to go ahead and really help others. I mean, it really is. I want to go ahead and help the small businesses in my community or in other communities be the best business that they can go ahead and be, simply because it's time to give back.
I love that. And what is the leadership lesson that has stuck with you most as we speak today?
I was able to have dinner with Norman Schwarzkopf after Desert Storm through a connection that my father had,
Mm.
and it was just absolutely wonderful to sit in the room with him. There were maybe 12 of us, and listen to what he thought about leadership and how he felt about leadership and the humility and everything else that you could hear. I mean, he had far more accolades than I would ever hope to achieve, but he was an individual just like you or me, and you could have a conversation with him.
Wow, wow. I love that. I love that. And we've come, listeners, we've come to a point where we have to end almost the show. But before we get to that point, I would like to thank from my heart, from the bottom of my heart, Chuck. He's done phenomenally great, just as we had announced at the beginning. I'm sure you've taken plenty of notes. I've taken plenty of notes. And please listen to this again, because this is something that will absolutely change your mind, because we are sure that even myself and my co-host, Shilpa, we have taken notes. We are going to implement this. And as you listen to this, the most important reason why we are on this show is we want to get the greatest ideas from the greatest minds from around the world. So share this episode with other people. Take notes and implement them, because you can only achieve success if you are able to use this. And I love to say something that Chuck mentioned, that we actually can control our destiny as long as we plan and implement it. So I want to leave you with the challenge to take every important point that he mentioned, and there are very many of them. You implement them and share them, because sharing is another way of saying I love you, right? So we'd like to really, again, once again, thank you, Chuck, for wonderful insights that you've been able to share. We are really grateful, and we look forward to having another conversation with you in the future. So if you are new to this site, would definitely like you to go down below. There are a lot of resources that we are going to place, but also how you can obtain the book, Hope is Not a Business Strategy. We're going to put the link here. Go out and purchase it. If you're a business owner, make sure you buy a couple of copies so that you can share with your team. And I'm sure Coach Shilpa, you'd like to say a few other things, so take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Today's episode has been so engaging and there is so much of learning, Chuck. Thank you so much. I loved when you said, like, always keep setting expectation and train people with your expectation. That keeps things going on and keep relationships intact. I also loved that your book's name, Hope is Not a Strategy. So we hope that our audience for they remember that hope is not a strategy and actually build a strategy. Stay curious, get insights from the people whom you're working with, answer their questions, don't disregard the questions asked by the young brigade in your team. And even if you are an introvert, you can be a great leader. If you love people, you tell them to align their values with actions. These are my takeaways. And I simply love that, Chuck. So thank you for being with us once again.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I mean, what a wonderful show you guys have.
Thank you. Thank you. We are greatly pleasured, and we are definitely going to share this. More people should learn this, because, and one of the things that really touched me most is the fact that you're very humble, despite your accolades, very, very humble, ground down to the earth, really to almost ground zero, if you may. That humility is something that many leaders lack today. So as you listen to us, you can look up Chuck, his accolades and his humility, and use this as an opportunity to judge yourself and see, okay, I'm a leader, I'm a business owner, I am a department head, whoever you are a leader. And so the nuggets you've got from Chuck's episode today are absolutely things that will take you to the next level, so that you can be a person of influence, so that you can be a person of significance. See what he's doing? Right now, he's giving back to the businesses. He wants them to make fewer mistakes than he did. And so, again, I encourage you to share this episode with your family, friends, and associates. And if you're new to this podcast or channel, go ahead, subscribe so that you're able to download resources not only from Chuck but other guests that are experts in their space, so that your family, yourself, and your community can benefit. So we also invite you to join our private leadership community, career transition community, and the coach training community, so that we can learn more and really build it to the next level. And feel free to reach to us for coaching, consulting, and mentoring opportunities. And once again, below this episode, we are going to put the contacts of how you can get the book from Chuck, and also how you can reach out to him just in case you need to work one-on-one with him. He's phenomenal.
Yes.
He's a coach. He's been in the military. He's a business owner. He's a parent. He's a grandparent. So there's so much really you can learn from him. So we encourage you to reach out to him. And if you'd like to begin the conversations, please write to us at leadtalkpodcast@gmail.com so that we can forward your recommendations and all those kind of things over to Chuck. So we are ready to help you excel in your leadership, your career, your coaching, and above all, your business. So we ask you to stop struggling, start leading. So see you next time.
Next time. Bye.
Thank you.